If there was one thing the world was asking for, it was for one more podcast about CrossFit. Well, here we are anyways. This is the Silverback Media Podcast, where we share the stories of the everyday CrossFitter, so that more people are encouraged and empowered to try it themselves. Here's your host and everyday CrossFitter, Marco Mejia.
Silverback Media Crew, episode 3. Episode 3 today. This is a good one, guys. We have Mary Kate Tengler, better known as MK. MK's on the show today. This is going to be a quick intro for me because I need you guys to just hear this story, okay? We hear a lot about, or there's a lot of jokes or fun pointed at the idea of the community being such a crucial part of the CrossFit methodology. And I think this episode today is going to give you a real sense of what we mean when we say that the community is such an important part of the methodology. Yes, the workout's important. Yes, the lifestyle change is important. That's what really drives the change. But what cements it all, or what sits underneath that, is the community component and everybody working together. And in this story, and in this conversation with MK, you're going to hear about how the community aspect came into her life at such a crucial, vulnerable, emotional time of her life. So you're going to hear that story played out here. Thank MK for sharing that. It was a very vulnerable piece to be able to share that. So that's enough from me. Guys, check out this episode. Let's go talk to MK.
Oh, okay. Here we are, MK. We made it.
Hey.
Couple technical difficulties, and yet here we are. We have prevailed.
We have prevailed.
We have prevailed. All right, welcome. Your guest number 4 on the podcast. 4?
Pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, 4. All right, so let's go back to the start. Let's just rewind, right? Tell me about MK, Mary Kate, growing up, athletic background, like growing up, what kind of sports were you involved in? How did those things go, right? If we go back to a young.
Yeah. Wow. So I was probably too active of a kid. I played kind of every sport growing up. It was probably like, now that I look back, like my parents were probably like, yeah, get out of here. Like you have too much energy. So I played everything. My big sport growing up was soccer. Played that competitively until high school, and then kind of made the switch over to basketball. But growing up, I did swim team, soccer, lacrosse, boys baseball until it got weird, and then girls softball. And
What age
then
was that? What age was that when it got weird?
when one of my like teammates was teaching me how to hock a loogie, that's when we made the switch to to girls softball. My parents were like, "You don't need to know how to do that." Um, no, that was like 8 or 9, and then switched over to softball. But then kind of like was really competitive into soccer, and made the switch to basketball in high school, and that was my
Okay,
sport
gotcha.
through college.
Oh, nice. Okay, I didn't realize. Did I know? I didn't know you played basketball in college. Did I?
I mean, it's not anything to write home about, but I did play basketball in college. I went to a
Okay.
very small Christian college, so I mean, not that it wasn't super competitive or anything, but it was,
Yeah.
I didn't play at UCLA. So, but it was great. I just kind of allowed me to continue, just having that athletic career. It was a good outlet, good time management skills were needed to be employed there. So, yeah, played through college.
Yeah, sure. I mean, especially exactly like you said, the time management component of as a
Huge.
college athlete, right? Balancing like, and I don't know, there's that saying that comes up on like all the NCAA commercials, right? It's like most of us are going to go pro in something other than sports, so it's like you're learning some life skills there,
Absolutely.
outside of just progressing at the sport too. What position did you play?
I played point guard in
Oh,
my
okay.
whole
So you were talking about, okay, so you were a point guard.
point guard.
And you had, okay, so you had, a bunch of activities that you played growing up. Obviously, as you got, older to high school and to college, right? The need to kind of specialize a little bit more.
Yep.
Worked out, obviously, if you played basketball in college, right? You need to kind of make, have some focus there. Thinking back on that, how did like having all that variety, and I don't know if it was something maybe you realized at the moment, or you can look back on now. How did having that
Oh yeah.
variety benefit you now, like now looking back on it?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question because I do think about that often. I think about these, young kids that tend to start specializing at a much younger age, which is all good and fine, but I feel like that allowed me to not get burnt out and not have like a ton of reps on like a single like muscle or like I feel like I don't know. I witnessed a lot of injuries, especially with soccer, like a lot of knee injuries, a lot of ankle injuries, and I was just lucky enough to never had that. And I wondered if that was just because I kind of had a more diverse background in sports and wasn't just like always hitting the same muscle groups every day for practice. So yeah, I was just really lucky enough to have that variety, and it really kept it fun. I don't think I ever got to a point with a sport where I was just so frustrated or like turned off by a particular sport. So that was really nice too, just to have that. Honestly, it was a massive luxury just to be able to play all these different sports and then just kind of decide, oh, I like this one best, and then pursue that a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, because then once you got to the point where it was time to pick, right? Then at least you had like you said, probably fitness wise, you had a wide
Yeah,
variety of activities you've done. So physically, you're probably way better prepared, and then also just like a little bit mentally too. Like, okay, I'm gonna pick
totally.
soccer or basketball, and I haven't
Yeah,
been doing this as a specialty my whole life, so I'm not like exhausted by it.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
So at what point, as you know, as you're kind of progressing along, at what point do you start, like, did you start to really think about, fitness and training for those sports as you were growing up? Did that become a factor, or was it a lot of like, hey, just go play the sports and progress that way? Like, how did fitness start to become part of the picture, if it did at all at that point, through that through
Yeah.
that early part?
No, that's yeah, another great question. So I think once I transitioned from soccer to basketball in high school, I realized, okay, this is what I want to do, and I want to play this in college. So therefore I have to do extra stuff in order to be good enough to make that happen. So it wasn't, I think before that like high school basketball moment, I just kind of would go through the motions, go to practice, and that was my fitness, so to speak. But
Yeah.
once I hit that, probably my sophomore year of high school. I decided that I needed to do a bunch of extra stuff, strength training, doing. I kind of like got. I was kind of that like weird high school person that like got friends together in the summer and be like, yeah, let's like do drills and practice. So yeah, I'm looking back, I'm like, God, I'm such a nerd. But that really
That
did play
tracks.
a
That
big.
tracks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally tracks. But it really did play a massive part in just like being well, like kind of forming a really cool, tight knit like group of girls and team, but then also like having this extra fitness and extra layer and preparation on top of like like basically before the season started. So it was that's when I really started thinking, okay, like what can I do to make myself faster, like quicker laterally, jump higher, and there was all these different strength movements that I really hadn't ever thought about before. I think I just growing up playing so many sports, I was just kind of considered athletic and I could kind
Yeah.
of do different things kind of when I wanted to. But then once I reached that point in high school, I was like, okay, I need to like really focus and try to hone these different, athletic skills that I may have that were just kind of that I was just kind of lucky to have at that point. It wasn't anything that I had built myself or really put effort into, and that was like a turning point for me for sure.
So okay, that's really cool to hear that like you were kind of helping organize some of your other teammates and stuff too. Did like were who was giving you guys the drills, or who was putting you guys through the drills during that time, or was it just like, hey, let's all get together? I'm MK and I'm running this. And, maybe not that crazy, but but like who was leading it, right? Because obviously, like at
Yeah.
that age, I got to imagine like for you that I don't know if it felt they're like thinking back on it, it's like that's a different kind of person that goes out of their way to actually organize a group of high schoolers or middle schoolers together at that time to do that.
Totally.
Um, but were you also then, all right, here's what we're going to do too while we're all here, or was everybody just kind of chipping in? Like how did that look?
Yeah. So I would kind of organize that aspect of it as well. And I wasn't
Oh,
a
cool.
very
Okay.
assertive. Yeah, I really wasn't a very assertive younger person. But I remember there was kind of long story short, the gal who was we had a senior that was a point guard and she had left, and so that was
Mm.
my sophomore year. She had already left, so like I had to kind of be that like unofficial leader, and I was like. Well, I was like totally not comfortable being in that position, but I just remember my coach saying like, "Yeah, you gotta do this, and you gotta be as assertive as you can." So I remember trying to do that again in that summer period. But yeah, I had these. This is gonna sound again very nerdy, so it totally tracks. But I had these like DVDs of this one basketball player that is like an old school basketball player. His name's Pistol Pete Maravich, and he.
Oh,
Um,
of course, Pistol Pete.
okay,
Did
okay,
he?
cool.
Yeah. What didn't he have the? Caitlin Clark just broke that record, right? Of like
Yeah,
most points scored. Okay, all right.
exactly.
Old Pistol
Exactly.
Pete, LSU.
Old Pistol
Good old,
Pete. Pew, pew.
old
Yeah.
Pistol.
Yeah. Totally. Okay, I'm glad you at least know that name.
Mm,
So he had this like old, I'm sure they were on VHS before they were on DVDs, but they were just like these drills of like ball handling drills, shooting drills, passing drills. And so I again, like just nerd, I would watch these DVDs and I would take those drills and then like teach them and like kind of incorporate them with these girls that I was like kind of playing like unofficial summer pickup ball with. So yeah, it was bizarre, but it worked, and we ended up like like just gelling as a group of girls, but then also doing quite well in the season too, which
so,
was great.
heck yeah, that's probably a good feeling too to like go through
Totally,
that, put that together, and be like, all right, it's coming
absolutely,
together.
absolutely.
uh, okay, so now let's fast forward a little bit.
Mhm.
I'm curious now. I played baseball in college, right?
Oh,
And so
sweet.
kind of thinking back on my experience as my college career ended. So I was, I guess, a little bit on the opposite side of the spectrum from you in terms of like I did play baseball majority. Like I was relatively specialized the majority of of my life, kind of leading up to that.
Yeah.
So when that ended for me, that was a really tough transition period. I'm curious, how was that for you, right? Obviously you had a wider variety of sports, but then you narrowed down to soccer and ultimately basketball in college. When that was, when that came to an end, how was that transition into the next chapter?
Not good, not good.
Not
So I realized
good.
that at that point you can't eat everything that you want because you're all of a sudden you're working like we would have kind of two-a-days basically. So we would practice in the morning or do conditioning in the morning and then have practice in the afternoon. And so you just kind of like you couldn't eat enough calories to kind of keep up with that.
Yeah,
And then once that ended, not only was it a big shock just from a purpose standpoint, like it just that I think basketball definitely gave me purpose in college, which is I don't want to say that's like bad to say, but I wish that I was a more well-rounded human being, but it was so much of my time and my focus. So when it ended, not only was it just kind of like a shock to the system from like what am I here for? What am I doing? But then also like from a fitness standpoint, I was just so used to going to practice and basically taking orders almost that
yeah,
I didn't know I well I probably wanted a little bit of a break, but then when I had that break I was like I don't even know where to start. I don't know what to do. Like
yeah,
how do I work out? So
yeah.
that was a really tough transition after college.
That's that makes it. That's like I hear you saying that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like almost exactly my experience too, right? Like it through
Yeah.
that whole window of time, right? Every day you wake up and like yes, you have class and stuff, but like okay, I'll like hey man, I guess class goes along with it too, right? You need to do well enough to be able to
Sure.
play. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
bare minimum. That's a whole separate story on how that went. But you wake up and every day you've got like your plan of like this is what we're working towards, right? Whether it's a
Yeah.
certain number of games you want to win, is trying to make it to the playoffs or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But like there's a very clear like this is what we're working towards and this is the work that's required to do that, right? And it's like
100%.
almost like out of nowhere, it's gone.
It's gone.
You just one day to the next, over, done,
Yeah.
and it's like all right, here you go, out into the world, find your
Yeah.
next thing. Good luck, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I know. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, and then you're thrust out into the real world, right?
And then what? Yeah, I mean,
And yeah,
that transition was very very hard. Yeah.
so what came next for you? And well, maybe we can keep it more focused on like the fitness side of things, right? Because obviously I want to get into like how you found CrossFit and things too, right? But now, okay, so like you said, you finish up your basketball career, you have this kind of like at the time life shift, right? Purpose shift. You got to figure out, okay, what am I going to do for like health, workout routines?
Yeah.
What does that start to look like then? Post college career.
Oof. So yeah, my post college career is probably going to be, I mean, similar to a lot of people that played sports, but then also just I had a kind of like a funky, kind of additional thing thrown in, unfortunately. But um, I so like just initially, I remember my parents moved when I was in college. They moved from Northern California, Bay Area to Arizona. So
Okay.
that's when so not only was I just kind of kind of thrust into the world after college and sports. And I was like, what do I do? But, you have to find a job. And so that was when I moved to Arizona.
Yeah.
And from like a fitness standpoint, I just remember this, I mean, and I'm sure this resonates with so many people, but I just remember like getting a gym membership, going to the gym and being, just like, okay, I have to do cardio for 30 minutes or something. And then like there's a weight rack over there. I think like we did weights, I think, at some point. So I'll just kind of do some of those movements. But it was like so unorganized, so like zero plan. And I just like didn't know what to do. Like
Yeah,
as long as I like sweated, I was like, okay, like that was good.
like
But
check
it
the
never
box.
felt right, right. I never felt accomplished. I never felt like I really did anything. I was never sore. Like it just, I'm sure a lot of girls can probably um, resonate with this too. Like I was like gaining weight, but I was working out, and I was like, what is going on? So it was just a
Yeah,
whole funky time. Yeah,
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and like you said, I mean, you got the piece where you're doing that. I guess did you come to Arizona then at that point?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. So
yeah,
then now you've kind of got this life shift. You're out of college, basketball is done, and you're in a completely different
yep,
location, right? And you're like,
yep.
what in the world?
What
Like,
what do I
I've
do?
got to make friends. Like,
That too. And I was like, how do I do that? I've never had to like, and I'm sure everyone has goes through this. You never really have to learn to make friends when you're in school because it's just kind of everyone's around you and it's just like a default thing. Like you're either interested in the same thing, playing the same sport, your teammates or your friends. And then once you graduate, you're like, uh-oh, like I need to have
uh,
actual like interpersonal communication skills to speak to someone and not be weird, which hasn't really
yeah.
developed for me, but that's okay. I mean, but you know what I
You're
mean?
like,
It's
wait.
like it's crazy.
You're like, what do I just say hi? Like, is that how that
Yeah,
works? I
what's
don't know.
the yeah. Do
What
I
do I do here?
wave? Yeah, right.
I don't know what to do with my hands. Okay. Okay, so then no, and that's that. Yeah, it's so interesting
Gosh.
hearing that because I'm like, oh my gosh, I had that exact same thing happen. Right, so I like totally picture myself in that same
Yeah.
situation. So I know exactly how that felt. Right. How did that then? Like, when was the and again, if there's another piece in between there, right?
Yeah.
When was like the first time maybe you heard about CrossFit?
Yeah.
Had you already
So
heard of it at that point, and were just like maybe, or had it not even come into your world at that point?
unfortunately, no. So really the I'll tell you about the kind of the way I found out about CrossFit. There is like a little piece in between there. So when I
Yeah.
graduated school, came to Arizona, was doing these weird workouts. Yeah, and was living in this apartment and with thankfully with a friend that I worked with. And anyway, it was just kind of like a weird time. Also during that time, my dad unfortunately got sick. So I moved home. See, local, like my parents were local, so I moved home and then he needed like it just kind of progressed very quickly. So he needed 100% care and my mom was still working and so I thankfully, my job was very flexible and I could, work remote similar to what I do now. And moved home and was helping, take care of him and be there for him. And so then really at that point, my fitness was basically zero. And that was probably for, gosh, a few years. And I remember, like literally the year before he passed away, one of my friends told me about CrossFit, and I was like, I don't have time for that. Like, it sounds cool, but I mean, there's no way I can do that. And then after he passed away, my friend, same friend, she was like, I think you should really try this because I was doing absolutely nothing. And then of course, going through that, I was in a funky, mental state, and it was tricky and hard. And I remember when she's like, you should try it. And I was like, oh gosh, like that's the last thing I want to try, but sure. Okay, fine, I'll do it. And I
Yeah.
remember I went to a CrossFit gym local in Scottsdale, not CrossFit North Scottsdale. And I tried it and I was like, this is awesome. Like it kind of takes that. It not only is like a wonderful release for those of us that, have been lucky enough to play sports and just kind of have that outlet of fitness, but it also has that outlet of competition because you're able to kind of have that healthy competition with, classmates and just try and like get one more rep than someone else
Yeah.
or run a little faster than they did. So it was just really cool and really really powerful to experience that. And then again, just kind of being in a funky, period of my life, I just was still it was still like that post college weirdness. My dad had just passed away. I was just kind of in a bit of a, not a bit of a rut. I was definitely in a rut. And that definitely gave me community and it gave me just an athletic outlet for sure, a fitness outlet.
Yeah, it's almost like it reintroduced the feeling that you had like in those summers with your teammates, right? Where it
Absolutely.
was like, all right, we're all going to get together, we're going to work hard, we're all working on this thing together, right? And it was like you had that was kind of missing. And then obviously, like with what you mentioned about your dad, which by the way, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry
Absolutely.
about
Thank you.
that's that like I didn't know that, so like that as I'm hearing
No,
that.
thank you.
Oh yeah. What
Heavy. Yeah.
how's yeah yeah no, but I obviously appreciate you sharing that because I think that gives good perspective in terms of like stuff these things happen and
Yep.
something like CrossFit, and not that it's a magic pill necessarily, but something like that can be a what's the best way to put it, maybe like a life preserver in the middle of a
100%.
situation like that if you're willing if you're willing to kind of step into the gym. How soon after or like what was it about the timing between like when your dad passed away and
Yeah.
that first experience?
It was actually like probably a few months.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a few months. So yeah, I would say roughly a few months. And that, and
Okay.
again, like just to what you said about CrossFit not necessarily being a magic pill, like agreed, but it also, during that time, and especially during that time when I was, kind of helping take care of my dad and just kind of basically at home with him 100% of the time, I didn't have any friends. Like I had zero friends. I had no real core friend group. There weren't people that I was, pouring, into, and there weren't people pouring into my life either. And that was just it was a very like isolated time. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world, but I wasn't getting that community, that sense of community from anywhere.
Yeah.
And then when I tried CrossFit, I was like, wow, not only are these people like just like kicking ass and like doing crazy weird stuff and weird movements I've never seen before, but they're also like really nice and they like said good job and they talked to me and like it was a really cool experience for sure.
Yeah, it's like it's amazing what can happen when just like a couple people reach out there and you get the
Yeah,
sense that they like genuinely care about you and they actually care
totally.
about you doing well. Like, I mean, and you probably, I'm sure you felt this too. I know I have, right? If you like, and I'm sure most CrossFit gyms are like this, the different class times have like their core group of people that go at that time, right?
Totally.
And so
Yes.
if you're, as the more you go at that certain time, you just kind of become it becomes a part of the routine for that whole
Yeah.
group. Not, and this
Yeah.
is not like a clicky way, right? This is not like, obviously
Sure.
it's very welcoming, but it's like then, if one of those people maybe doesn't show up for a few days at a time or something, and it's
Oh,
like out
yeah.
of genuine care, it's like, hey,
Group chat. Yeah.
is
Where are
everything
you?
okay?
Yeah.
What's going on? What's going on, right? And that's 100% from a place of caring, and that's not something that you get at at any other gym. I'm not going to name any, but you know what I mean.
No.
Like
Nope.
that's a
That's
part of that
totally right.
community aspect that you're going to get there, right? And it's very unique in that way.
Absolutely.
Do you remember that what that first workout was that you did?
I don't remember the actual workout, but I remember there were pull-ups and there were thrusters.
Okay.
It wasn't Fran,
If you
but it
tell me that
was
you did, I
no, because I
already
think
had someone
was that
else tell me that
Jen's?
they're
I think
that
that was
was Jen's.
Jen's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
no,
first workout was
thank
Fran.
God,
Oh,
no. But I remember, like I used to be able to do like 20 plus strict pull-ups as like a junior higher. Yeah. Like
dang. Okay.
but I also weighed like probably 65 pounds and like, didn't, so that there's that. But I remember I was like, oh, pull-ups, I got that. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, I don't. So that was a
That's like,
very humbling workout. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there were pull-ups, there were thrusters, which I had never done before.
yeah.
And there was one other movement as well. But yeah, it sucked.
Okay.
I mean, it was terrible. I remember just being like, I was just like the worst. But then once you're done, you're like, oh, this is awesome. Like the feeling
Yeah.
that the I guess like even just the going through the suck fest basically of the
Yeah.
class was just really cool. I loved that. It was really really fun.
Did you have a moment, and maybe that first workout was it, right? But did you have a moment maybe when you first started, when you were going, that you were like, okay, like it clicked. This is it. This is the thing for me, right?
That's a good
Did you
question.
was there anything in there that happened that you remember? And maybe it was that first workout. Maybe you know what I mean.
It definitely like I was hooked with the first workout for sure, and there was
Mhm.
just knowing that there was so much stuff that I didn't know how to do. Really, it honestly kept me coming back because I wanted to get better at it and I wanted to, and I think that's probably the I always hesitate saying athlete, but I guess that is the athlete in me, just to kind of like find stuff that I'm not good at and want to get better at it.
Yeah.
So that definitely, there was never a question of like, oh, I'm not going to try this again. I was like hooked from class one, but I will say that, and this is not necessarily a plug for CrossFit North Scottsdale, but when I experienced my first Murph at CrossFit North Scottsdale, that's when I was like, this is different. Like
Yeah,
this community is different. This sport is different. And it just that was I think the moment where I was like, I love this. And I'm
yeah.
never gonna not do it.
Like it's going to be a part of the routine in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah,
Yeah,
Murph is different, right? Murph is
totally.
different. Yeah, yeah. That first experience when like, yeah, you see like the whole community really rally around something
Yeah.
like that. And I mean, obviously the workout itself is very intense, and it's also provided in a way that literally anybody can show up and do it. And we're
Absolutely.
gonna find a way
Yeah,
for you to be able to get it done and give the effort, right? It's less about the score that you get on that day; it's more about the effort. And we're gonna
totally.
find a way to make it happen for you. So no, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Totally.
How did then being a part of the CrossFit community at that point, right? At that point in your life when you first started, or I guess before that. So had you heard anything about like when your friend first kind of mentioned it to you? Did you like look into it at all? Like, oh, what is this CrossFit thing? Like, what was your? Did you have any preconceived ideas of what CrossFit was before you actually went and experienced it?
I did a little bit. Like so she lived in San Diego at the time and she was telling me how they would just go to like random, garages and do like this was probably like old school CrossFit a little bit. And I was like, that sounds like just
Like grungy?
hilariously. Yeah, yeah. But she mentioned, kind of some of the workouts that she was doing and I was like, that does sound interesting, but like I don't have time for that. It's funny the excuses that you make when you're like, I just don't want to try something new. Um, but
Hold
I
on,
so
hold on, hold on,
yeah,
hold on, hold on.
yeah.
Before you get in, like what you said, that comment, yes, is correct. I think when we also think about like what you had going on in your life at that
Oh,
too,
sure.
right? It's like, hold on, that wasn't just an
Sure.
excuse, okay? Like,
You're right. No, that's a good point. That's a good
like let's there's a balance there. There's a balance there.
good point.
Yes, you probably could have, but like also, that's a pretty
Right.
serious life thing you were having.
Totally.
You
No,
didn't
you're
have a
right.
boo boo on your foot, like you were
That's
carrying.
true.
You know,
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Touche. But yes, she would tell me like some of these workouts that they were doing, and I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like for some like for like some of the like movements she would say, and I was like, what's a wall ball? I don't know what that is. But it did spark like I started following some CrossFitters on Instagram, and so I would see um like little workouts here and there. And that's actually, sorry to probably jump the gun a little bit. That's when I started following an athlete by the name of Jacob Hepner, which I'm sure everyone
yeah.
knows. And then he started getting involved in something called tactical games. And so I was like, that's ridiculous. I will keep that in the back of my mind. And that's kind of how I eventually kind of morphed from CrossFit to tactical games, but we'll get there.
Yeah, 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 we'll get there. Okay. Okay. And then around that kind of initial CrossFit experience, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but it gets more to ask it specifically.
Yeah.
How did then joining the CrossFit community, with everything you had with your dad passing away and the timing of then when you joined, how did that help you through that grieving process?
Ooh. Yeah.
Obviously I'm asking that assuming it did, based
Absolutely
on
it
the way
did.
you're talking about it. So
Yeah. Absolutely it did. I think, and anyone that is, hopefully listening to this that's either going through like a situation like that or, maybe currently or has gone through it, I think you can probably all agree that um, you need something to kind of break the cycle of just kind of being in like a mental funk and even a physical funk. Like I just was doing absolutely nothing, and I think too, I'm not like the best uh I'm really good at compartmentalizing, so there wasn't ever like a moment where I was just kind of like sitting in my feelings a bit and just trying to like really process through everything and like really properly grieve. I don't know if you can properly grieve or not, but I was just kind of struggling all around, and I just needed something to kind of disrupt that cycle and kind of get me out of that funk. And honestly, that was CrossFit. It gave me a place to go. I know that sounds kind of silly, but it gave me um, a time to be somewhere and to do something. And then it gave me the outlet to kind of get that frustration out. And then, I think we all know Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. Uh, Endorphins make you happy, and happy people do great things. I'm gonna change the quote there. So it gave me that like endorphin kick that I really needed to kind of get out of that rut. And so, like I said, just like gave me a place to go, gave me a little bit of a little bit more purpose, and it also gave me a good community of people that like kind of knew what I was going through and just were supportive. And that's super important. I feel like the CrossFit community does a really good job of just rallying around people and being there for each other, no matter,
Yeah.
you know, what class you're in, no matter how frequently you come. I think there's just always, you can always find commonality with people that you're in class with and kind of suffering through a workout with, which is really neat.
Ain't that the truth, right? It's like you're going through something really, really hard together by
Yeah.
choice. Just
Yeah. You're
by
paying
choice.
for it too.
I'm gonna say,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna say by choice. So you're
Yeah.
trading for money, so right. So I'm gonna assume by choice, right? Yeah, like that. There's a bond that just shows out there. Kind of like what we were referencing before, especially if you're showing up to a similar class time with a similar group of people. Like it's like
Yep.
I've seen you in here throwing down. I know what you're
Yep.
about. Like we're you and me, like we got each other, kind of thing,
Totally.
right? Like whether it's said or not said, like everybody kind of forms that bond is formed. So
100%.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Okay, so and then you mentioned you referenced the tactical games and this Mr. Jacob Hepner, right?
Yeah.
Former CrossFit Games athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tactical games, you come across that, and
Yeah.
then and actually we mentioned Jen, right? She
Yeah.
credits you with getting her with dragging her into that thing too. So then how did you end up getting into the tactical games and into that?
Yeah.
Actually training for that and experiencing that.
Ooh, yeah, it's a wild, awesome sport for sure. So at this point, I had moved from this. It wasn't even really technically a CrossFit gym, but I'd moved to CrossFit North Scottsdale. That was probably like almost 3 years ago now. So I'm at CrossFit North Scottsdale. I'm following Jacob Hebner on Instagram, and I see him doing these like wild, you know, like fitness and like shooting videos. And I'm like, what the heck is this? So I look into it a little bit more, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is CrossFit plus shooting. Like win-win. And I had grown up, yeah, it was like just like a unbelievable. I had grown up shooting. That was just actually something that my dad and I would do together. It's just kind of like our thing, and we would just kind of go to like different gun clubs in California and then, you know, in Arizona as well, and just kind of shoot for fun. And so I've been around guns, comfortable with firearms. And I saw this and I was like, that is like my two favorite things. Like, let's go. So I started looking into it a bit more, seeing what the requirements were for tactical games, like what type of gear you would need. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. Like, let's just do it. Let's just sign up for
Yeah.
one. And so I signed up for one, and then Jen helped me prepare for it, and I was super prepared from a fitness aspect of things. Like I was probably over prepared. Was like smoking everyone on the workouts, which I never say about anything because I'm like I always feel like I suck at everything. So I was like, man, I'm killing you guys on these workouts. But my shots, like I don't know if they were going, you know, everywhere. And so
Just spraying
just
out all over the
spraying
place.
targets. Yeah. And probably hitting wrong targets. Yeah. So it was a very humbling first experience. I think I ended up getting fourth, but it was a very humbling first experience. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, not only do you get to do CrossFit in the dirt with friends, but then you're shooting guns as well. It's really cool.
That's awesome. That's really
Yeah.
cool. And if anybody listening to this wants to hear what it sounds like for someone practicing the tactical games, what their dialogue is as they're going, follow MK on Instagram because you're very open about what you say to yourself while you're shooting,
Oh,
and
yeah. It's hilarious.
it's so funny. It's
It's
so interesting to watch.
a problem. It's a sickness. Yeah. And I feel like so many people do this, but like, so I do these, you know, local shooting matches in like Mesa and Cave Creek area. And I have this camera that I put on my hat, and when I'm going through different like stages or through the match, I'm like talking to myself like a crazy person. I'm like, "Ooh, that was good," or "Ooh, wow, wow, why are you out of breath?" Like I don't know, I don't know. Like I knew I was weird, but it was just kind of next level when I put this hat camera on. And I was like, "Yikes,
I'm,
I need
I'm
to
sure
fix
when you
this."
first listen back to it, you're like, "What in the world am I doing here? How did
Right.
so many inside thoughts get out? What is going on?"
Totally. Yeah. Oh man,
Oh my
classic.
goodness, that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay. Well, I have one more question for
Yeah.
you, and I want you to think back. Okay, so now we've kind of like recapped MK's athletic fitness life story, so to speak, right?
Yep.
So if you think back to the version of you that was right after college, right after college, basketball's done, and now you're like, kind of rudderless, so to speak, right? And I say that
Yeah.
as knowing exactly what that felt like, or that version of you that like first heard about CrossFit, like maybe while you were taking care of your dad, and you kind of had that like, oh, I don't know, like I don't have time for this. And again, we talked about how like that's not necessarily an excuse. Like
Sure.
that's legit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you could talk to those two versions of yourself, right? You could sit them down. We got this weird magic time machine, and you could tell them all about this thing called CrossFit that you found, right? And you would tell them, hey, like this is something you need to try. What would be your best advice to those previous versions of you to help them kind of find that or make their way into the gym for the first time?
Wow. Yeah. I think oh, that's a good one. I think there was just always this fear of trying something new, and I think I hadn't been put in that position before, or for a while, where I just I felt uncomfortable with something or I felt new at something. I think I had always just kind of grown up again playing so many sports, and there was never this. Wow, this is gonna. I don't want this to sound any particular way, but I never really went through that period of like, oh, I'm not really good at this. Like it just kind of
Mhm.
stuff kind of tended to come a little bit naturally to me, and maybe at a younger age that's easier for that to happen. But I think I was
Yeah.
just scared of not being good at something and scared of
Mhm.
um like I guess like the judgment of that. I don't know from who. Like I wasn't like thinking through that fully, but I think I was just nervous to like not just to yeah, just to kind of suck at something. But that honestly is the probably the coolest part about CrossFit is that it's accessible to everyone. And I think there was I mean, I was like a big time scaler of so many movements, and there's zero shame in that. Like there's so much coolness in that actually, because you still get to do the exact same workout just on a different, like a slightly different plane than the rest of the class. So um I think what I would tell myself is just don't be afraid to try it. And I know that sounds like super generic and probably very cliche, but that was the biggest thing, the biggest hang up for me was just being scared to try something new. And once I did, I was like, oh my gosh, these people are amazing. They welcome me with open arms, especially when I came to CrossFit North Scottsdale. I remember the first time I came to a class, I just like put my stuff in a corner and just basically hid until class started. And I remember Casey Scholstis came over and she was like, hey, come on in. Like, oh, are you new? And I was like, yeah, like I don't know what to do. And I mean, and she's like one of my great friends to this day, and like that's like super cool, and just like classic CrossFit and
Yeah.
classic CrossFit North Scottsdale, just like very welcoming, and there's like zero shame to just being new. That's the beautiful part, and people like cheer for you when you come to class for the first time or when you do a lift for the first time. It's awesome. So don't be afraid to try something new.
Yeah. And I know you said like that sounds generic, but it's like it's so funny when you kind of think back on a question like that. Sometimes the best advice is the simplest, right?
Yeah,
So it's like that you almost want to come up with some fancy thing, but it's like no, really, if you just boil it down, it's like hey, that fear that you have of like just going there and showing up and trying, like
yeah,
that's the biggest barrier to get over, right? So
totally.
that's awesome. That's awesome. That's great. MK, thank you. You're the
Thanks for
best.
having me, Marco. This
You're the best.
podcast
You
is
got it.
legit, so thank
This
you.
is
It's
legit.
legit.
All
Try.
right. MK, that's four down, 10,000 to go. MK, we'll talk soon. See ya.
Awesome. Thanks, Marco. See ya.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing with a friend. To get notified of future episodes, please follow the show on your favorite podcast app so you can continue to hear these stories. For more behind-the-scenes content of everyday CrossFitters, follow on YouTube and Instagram at Silverback Media. Until next time, this has been the Silverback Media Podcast.